Pnawn da pawb a croeso cynnes i chi gyd. A very warm welcome to you today to this cabinet meeting, which is a hybrid meeting. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should the live streaming fail, the meeting will continue and a recording will be available through the council's website following the conclusion of the meeting. Can I remind members that translation facilities are available and for those attending on Zoom to choose your language of choice. For those wishing to speak in the chamber, please raise your hand. For those in Zoom, please use the raised hand function. We will alternate between speakers in the chamber and on Zoom. For those attending remotely, please note that those in the chamber will be able to use the chat facility. And if possible, Zoom attendees are required to leave their camera on at all times. So we'll move on to agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence. Okay, I think Councillor Liz is on her way, so she did say she might be late. No other apologies? Okay, agenda item 2, declarations of interest, Code of Local Government Conduct. Members are reminded they must declare the existence and nature of their declared personal interest. Any members like to declare an interest? No. Item 3, urgent matters. I'm not aware of any urgent matters. So we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is minutes of the cabinet. To approve and sign as a correct record the minutes of the previous meeting. You'll find those on pages 4 to 13. Members are happy with those. Can I have a proposer and a seconder to accept the minutes? Councillor Julie, Councillor Grumley, can we show that we're in favour of accepting that? Okay, thank you all. So agenda item 6 is announcement by the leader. Members, no doubt you'll be aware that one of our levelling up bids was successful. We were notified on Thursday that we'd received just in excess of £18 million to progress with the Conwy Valley transport bid. This looks to improve connectivity from the coast along the valley, but also to fund some really essential flood defence works. The village of Trevi, as you will know, quite often in the winter is completely cut off by winter floods. So it'll look to alleviate that. We absolutely welcome investment in the county, but there's clearly still a lot of work to be done. And I think most importantly, there'll need to be really extensive consultation with our residents to make sure that any of the schemes that we're proposing have their support before we implement them. In terms of our unsuccessful bids, I'd like to thank both our local MPs, Robin Miller and David Jones. I spoke to them about them and they said they were both close, very close, but we will receive proper feedback at a later date. There will be a round 3 for future bids, but clearly any decision to proceed or not to proceed needs to come back through the democratic process, especially in light of our financial situation. So we will bring that back when we have further detail. So that's everything from me. Any announcements by the Chief Executive?
Thank you, Leader. Just to reiterate really, just thanks to the staff for putting the bids together. There was a lot of work involved in a very condensed period of time, and I'd just like to thank the staff for the time they put into it. And obviously we were successful with one, but there was substantial work with the 2 that weren't successful. So just a thank you to them for all the effort that was put in. And apart from that, there's nothing else from me, Leader.
Okay, yeah, I absolutely agree with that. A huge amount of work in a very short space of time. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item 7, which sits within my portfolio. It's the approval of the Conwy and Denbighshire Wellbeing Plan 23 to 28. You'll find that on pages 14 to 81, members. Okay, so if I'll take you straight to paragraph 3.1. So that sets out the legal basis for why we have a public service board. It's the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act 2015. As we're allowed to, Conwy and Denbighshire have formed one PSB. 3.2 sets out the membership of the PSB. As you can see, there's a really wide breadth there of public service, third sector, town community council representatives. At the moment, the chair of the board is the leader of Denbighshire and I act as vice chair. So 3.4 states the purpose of the PSB, which is to improve the economic, social, environmental and cultural well-being of Conwy and Denbighshire area. You'll all be aware of the 7 well-being goals outlined in the Act that are there. So there are 2 main tasks to do. The first one is to prepare and publish an assessment of the state of economic, social, environment and cultural well-being of Conwy and Denbighshire. And secondly, to prepare and publish a local well-being plan for the counties of Conwy and Denbighshire, setting out local objectives and the steps it proposes to take to meet them. So 3.6, 3.7 outlines a lot of research done, some really quite innovative work in terms of reaching some of the hard to reach groups, in terms of sort of hear their voice essentially. There's been good public consultation, and basically what we're looking to highlight is, I think the thing why the majority of us come into public services to try and make a more equal place in the two counties. We know we have significant areas of deprivation, and we really want to look to try and level that up where we can. 3.9 sets out the sort of main 4 key themes that we're going to look at. Well-being. Communities are happier, healthier and more resilient in the face of challenges such as the climate challenge, nature emergency and the rising cost of living. Economy. There's a flourishing economy supported by a skilled workforce fit for the future. Equality. Those with protected characteristics face fewer barriers. And housing. There's improved access to good quality housing. So in terms of the resource implications, this board doesn't have a sort of designated budget. It does have a lot of officer time, and it's clear it's more about leadership and good example and working together with other like-minded bodies to sort of learn from each other and make sure we're all working towards a common goal. This will be approved. If we approve it today, it goes forward to full council for their approval. So the recommendations is 2.1 on page 14, that Cabinet recommend to Council of Conwy and Denbighshire Wellbeing Plan for 23-28 be approved. So the document's there for you. I'm sure you've all had a good chance to read it, and we've got some excellent officers here who can answer any questions that I can't answer. So I'll open it up. I'm quite happy to move the recommendations. Councillor Chris.
Go on. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Leader. Well, yeah, this wellbeing plan will work across the collection of local public bodies, and that's its importance, emphasising equality, the reduction of deprivation and overall fairness. So I'd like to second the recommendation. And we all know this isn't just straightforward. We know we've got the challenges of climate change, nature emergency, rising cost of living and housing provision. So it's not going to be easy, but I think it's set out very well and logically and thoroughly. So I thoroughly support it.
Okay, Joel, Chris, any other members care to comment or any questions? Councillor Mike.
Yeah, I just love some of the words that come out with, like, communities are happier. You know, with when we've got cost of living and climate change now, I just wonder what I'm going to do to make my community a lot happier. I represent them to the best of my ability. But some of the words sometimes just get me. It's just a comment, Leader.
Comments noted, Councillor Mike. Okay, so if there's no more, we've had a proposer and a seconder. Can members indicate if they're in favour of sending it to council? Okay, thank you all very much. So we'll move on to the second part, which is the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. You'll find that on pages 82 to 90. Okay, so the Shared Prosperity Fund, members will be aware we've previously had the Community Renewal Fund. I spoke earlier in my comments about the Levelling Up Fund. This is the third manifestation of funding sources that are available essentially to replace funding that we would have received before Brexit. If you move to 3.1, so UK government set out 3 investment priorities. First is community in place, strengthening our social fabric and fostering a sense of local pride and belonging to build resilient and safe neighbourhoods. Supporting local businesses, creating jobs and boosting community cohesion by supporting local businesses, promoting networking and to help businesses promoting networking and collaboration and stimulating innovation and growth. Targeted support to help businesses grow innovation, productivity, energy efficiency, low carbon and exporting. The third category is people and skills, boosting core skills and support adults to progress and work, supporting disadvantaged people to access the skills they need, funding local skill needs and supplementing local adult skills provision, reducing levels of economic activity and supporting those furthest from the labour market. If we move to paragraph 3.3, that actually sets out the allocation that the 6 local authorities across North Wales will receive. It's important to note that this is an allocation. It's not a competitive process. This money is for Conwy and will be spent in Conwy, apart from some of the elements which may be done on a regional basis. I'm sort of thinking there, but sort of education and skills that may be better delivered regionally. It's worth noting that it's mainly a revenue scheme. 15% can be used for capital, but it's predominantly revenue. If you look at paragraph 3.4, there's £4 million allocated to Multiply. Multiply is a UK government adult numeracy funding pot. It's felt that actual allocation is higher than the need that we have in Wales. It was just one of the quirks of how the funding was allocated. So there's still work being done to see whether we can extend that to other elements of adult skills rather than just purely being based on numeracy, but that's still a work in progress. If you move to paragraph 3.6, there's the three sort of themes that the UK government selected, and that's the we've looked to allocate essentially 50% of the funding, communities in place, 5%, 5 million supporting local businesses, and the other 5 million for people and skills. But it can be amended. I think once we see where the demand lies, then we'll have a better idea of where that funding needs to go. So 3.7 sets out how we will look to deliver the programme. 3 main ways: 1, direct delivery by council teams using programme funding; 2, procured activity; and 3, funding given to third parties through open and competitive calls for proposals. It's important to note that this is time limited, needs to finish by March 25. So really keen that we get this out there as soon as possible. And I believe that the actual date when we're going to go out for calls will be the 30th of this month. So that's some really good news to see that that's going ahead. Across North Wales, there's a sort of core, we're all going to try and approach this the same, so it's consistent for residents and businesses across the different counties. In terms of looking at the size of projects, it's felt that we want to get maximum value, so it'll be mainly larger projects, but we also want to have funds in place in Conwy to support those smaller projects. So part of the proposals is that we'll set up a key fund for community in place supporting local businesses for those projects that fall below £250,000. As I said before, the final decision for all projects allocations rests with each local authority. 3.9 highlights the group that we're going to set up to operate this. The group will be known as the Conwy UK SPF Local Partnership Panel. Its membership will be as follows: council leader and economic development portfolio holder, cabinet member for finance, revenue and benefits, cabinet member for culture and leisure, chair of economy and place overview and scrutiny committee, head of economy and culture, section head economic development, head of finance. And we also want to appoint a third voluntary sector representative and a private sector representative. And additional link groups will be established where appropriate who can sort of make recommendations to the panel. 3.10 sets out the criteria that we'll expect the applications to meet. Again, there's still some work ongoing at this, and I think it's important that we retain some flexibility, that we can adapt as we see what projects are out there. I'll just take you to 6.1 resource implications. It's good news that up to 4% of this money can be actually used to administer the grants. And also there is no obligation for match funding, which is clearly an issue. So there will be no financial applications. We will look to work with other grant sources really to maximize this and work with, where we can. So we may look for an element of match funding if we're looking at private organizations, but that again, that's something that will come through for approval at a later date. So I'll take you through the recommendations one by one, which are on page 83. So the first is that Cabinet agree the establishment of a Conwy UK SPF local partnership panel to assess and support funding applications. 2.2, that Cabinet grant delegated authority to the portfolio holder for economic development to approve applications for UK SPF following recommendation by the Conwy UK SPF local partnership panel. Such delegation shall be limited to a maximum of £500,000 for the total value of the project, and any decision above this figure shall be referred to Cabinet. I just want to comment on that £500,000 is a lot of money. As the portfolio holder, I would not be comfortable making that decision unless there was absolute unanimous support from the board and from local members, and it was completely uncontroversial, because it does leave you quite exposed. So I think it'll be coming back to Cabinet wherever there's any doubt at all that it needs to be aired through the democratic process. I think that's only right and proper. But there is a timing element of these. Time is of the essence, so it's important that we're pragmatic and that things get approved in an appropriate and timely fashion. 2.3, that the principle establishing a key fund for both communities in place and supporting local businesses in order to allow smaller projects to be considered be approved, and that the terms of reference and allocated funding for the key fund be submitted to future cabinet following consultation with the Conwy UK SPF local partnership panel. So again, there's some work there about how much money we actually allocate for that pot. I think we need to be really careful about how that's set up in terms of fairness across the county, that all projects are considered on a geographical basis, rural basis, coastal basis, that it's seen to be fair and members have good involvement in it. So at this stage, it's just approval of the principle to come back for further detail to be approved as to how that will actually work in practice. And the last bit, 2.4, delegated authority to be given to the portfolio holder for economic development to appoint a representative from the third sector to sit on the UK SPF local partnership panel. I will take some advice from our officers on that, but I think it would make sense for CVSC to be involved as the third sector partner. But again, it's delegated authority, which I can bring back again. So those are the recommendations. It's quite a complicated report in some respects, members. So I'm more than happy to take any questions. We've got some officers there. I think Rhein's got his hand up. Rhein, did you want to come in?
Yes, thanks, Leader. Just 1 point in 2.4. There is a need to add a private sector rep as well to the delegation, because if you note in 3.9, we mentioned 2 extra members to the board, to the panel. And one is third sector, one is private sector. So just to cover that off, I think we need to add the words representative from the private sector also in 2.4. Thank you.
Okay, to you all, Corinne. Councillor Julie.
Thank you, Leader. And thank you for going through the report. So it's good to finally have it here. We've been talking about it for a long time, haven't we? So yeah, I agree. I think in terms of the multiply, I think really, as it says in the report, it needs to extend to literacy and probably a level of digital competency as well, because I think that's the area, certainly the feedback I've had over the years that people struggle with in terms of, certainly if they've been out of work for a length of time, it's that digital literacy that's incredibly important to catch up with where we're at. So we've got a pre-meet tomorrow for our skills and employability strategic board, and then we meet next week. So I'll put this on there as, I should imagine it's already an item for discussion anyway, but certainly it's something that we can then feed into what that maybe looks like, because certainly in terms of the multiply from a regional perspective, that's 21.8 million. That's a lot of money, isn't it? And I think something working together to address literacy and digital literacy would be a much better approach to take. But otherwise, I'm happy to second this, Leader, and that we move forward. But I agree, as you've said, £500,000 is a lot of money for you to approve yourself. So I think if there's anything that hints of any kind of contention, then it comes back and we can have a discussion through democracy. Thank you.
Yeah, and I entirely agree. And decisions can be called in as well. So clearly, I don't want to put myself in a situation where a decision is being called in. I'd much rather it was open and transparent in the first instance. Councillor Jeff, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Leader. Very much welcome the report. Very encouraging at a time now. Presently we're always short of money. Make sure Mike doesn't get his hands on too much of this. The question I want to ask is about the match funding. Is there a requirement for match funding on this, or is there a complete open book?
No requirement on us for match funding, but I'm right. I think I'm right in saying we have, if we wanted to, and we were bringing some schemes forward, we could look for other partners to match fund, but it's in our control.
Right, because that's of benefit to the rural areas and to the smaller communities where, in fact, they don't have the facility for match funding as some of them do on the coastal area. So that's encouraging from that point of view. Good, thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes, well, we're in Wales here, aren't we? And I just would like you to reinforce the fact that the delivery will take account of the Welsh language and also our equality duties. And having just mentioned climate change and nature emergency and everything, our environmental good practice, just to emphasize that. Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. They are listed in 3.10. Yeah, it is really good that we have control, and I think the ability to deliver some of those smaller key projects are really important as well. You mentioned the rural areas. It is very difficult for some of those big schemes just because the population's not there and the money's not there. But our rural areas are just important, and it's really key that we look to develop the right projects in the right place moving forward. Any other comments, members? So I proposed the recommendations with that amendment on the fourth bit that it would be both private and public sector. Does somebody second? Julie, you'd second them. Members show they're in favour then, please. Okay, diolch pawb.
Thank you very much, Leader. So this report is seeking financial direction by members for the remainder of this budgetary process. I think we've probably got about 4 weeks remaining. And it also informs us of our legal requirements for council to set a balanced budget for the financial year for 2023-2024. And I believe this meeting will be held on the 2nd of March. This is a detailed report that is now starting to pull figures together with more confidence and evidence, and I think you'll find that in the attachments to this report. I want to point out that it should be noted that this report only considers the council tax, which relates to Conwy County Borough Council. When the council tax bills, if you like, go out, there will be an element there for the police and town and community councils. They set their own precepts and we collect on their behalf. So I do get some comments from residents saying my council tax is X amount, and really they've included the police precept and town and community council precept. I would also like to point out that part of our council tax, I say part, quite a substantial amount of money goes to North Wales Fire Service, and I think including the rise, this year is going to be £7.4 million. So part of your council tax includes North Wales Fire Service, and that's £7.4 million. And I'd also like to point out that the Fire Authority raised their levy this year to us with an increase of 9.9%. That increase equates to a cash sum of £660,000. And to put that in perspective, a 1% rise on your council tax bill will bring in £620,000. So just looking at a 1% increase in council tax is just going to cover the Fire Authority's levy. So I just wanted to point that. I'm not criticising the service. They do a marvellous, wonderful job. And when you call 39s, they're there for you. But it needs pointing out. That's on the back of us asking our services for 10% cuts to balance the budget, and thanks to Welsh Government, I'll talk a little bit later on about the money we've had from them. That's allowed us, and we listened through the budgetary process to schools and social services regarding the pressures 10% would have on their services. So that's allowed us now to reduce the ask for social services and education schools, asking for 5% increase. Cut in their budget. So I'm going to go through this report, Chair, if you don't mind, via the tables. I'll spend a little bit of time on some tables and perhaps just brush through the other parts. I really benefited from the meeting only yesterday, where we spent near on 2 hours at Finance Resource Overview Scrutiny Committee, and to me, I felt really confident that the report stood up to 2 hours worth of scrutiny. So if I'm happy now, if you go over to page 97, and then you'll see table 1 on that page. So in here, you can see the increase. We were expecting around about just over 6 million increase from Welsh Government there, but thanks to UK and Welsh Government, this increase there. So we got a net increase on the AEF of 13.498 million. You can also see there that we lost out. We lost out on 1.3, just over 1.3 million, and that was as a result of basically predominantly population decrease, pupil data, etc., and information from the census. I won't dwell too much on that. So that basically gives us a provisional AEF settlement of 198,400,000. Page 2 on page table 2 on page 99. Basically, this is the current estimated shortfall, and I think it's worth noting, isn't it? You know, look where we came from. You know, we came from an area where over 36 million pound shortfall. The possibility of saying we're going to go into a section 114, which we steered down the barrel of that, and also we were looking at the possibility of mass staff redundancies. So at this stage, I want to pay tribute to Amanda Hughes, our strategic director, Amanda's team, Crian, who's here today, our chief executive, SLT, you know, all staff. It really has been a tremendous work program that we've gone through, council colleagues, the budget group, etc. So, you know, we've come a long way for that. So on table 2, that just gives you an idea of some of our issues and pressures. Incidentally, if you look at the pay pressures alone swallow up the increase that we've had from Welsh government. So again, now if we go to page 100 on table 3, there you will see the revenue business cases and the pressures included in our overall shortfall. We are assuming that we will be paying up all these and supporting all these pressures. And I believe, if I could be, I think this is going to finance overview scrutiny on the 6th of February. So we'll go through them revenue business cases in more detail at that meeting. Then it'll obviously then come along on to us. So they're the pressures you can see there. I won't go through them, but they add up to over £20 million. So that's on table 3. So if we go over to table 4, I'm not going too fast, am I? Hopefully you're okay catching up with me. So we're on page 103. So if you look at table 4, that basically just shows you the reduction in services that we've had over the last decade. And so, you know, we've had to cut, we've had to be more efficient, we've had to be, we've done everything for over 10 years. So what this table shows me and demonstrates is, for the want of a better phrase, the low-hanging fruit, the easy gains on cutting services, etc., or being more efficient, they went years ago. And as you can see there in the right-hand column, nearly £69 million worth of cuts. Table 5 at the bottom of that page gives us a monetary value of the percentage cuts. So we're looking there. We have on the right-hand column, it's saying that identified reductions of 11.57. We're not quite there yet, so we've still got a long way to go, and I want to bear that in mind as we go a little bit further on in that report. But you know, credit to services, they're really stepping up, identifying the savings, etc. So again, now if we go to page 105. I won't go through this. Basically, 105 gives us our reserves and balances. I'm going to take note from our strategic director, and I think the information that we're receiving, we all well know that our reserves are the sort of lowest in Wales, and that's been highlighted by the Wales Audit Office regarding our reserves. And we are being advised strongly not to use reserves. Take a sum of money out of reserves, and all you're doing is lowering your reserve and kicking the problem down for another year. So I'm certainly taking the advice strongly And I think it's worth saying that this year's budget will probably be using up some of the, most certainly the earmarked reserves. So looking at them reserves quickly, if you go to paragraph 618, you can see really out of the £39 million worth of reserves, you could only really look at using some 11 million, which we're being advised not to. And as I say, I'll take that advice, if to say, on the chin. Table 7 on page 106. This is we're starting to get into figures now with council tax, and obviously this is what's really important to Conway residents. So basically on table 7, you can see some examples of if we increase council tax by 10%, it would bring in just over £6.2 million into Conway. And I think council tax is about 27% of our overall budget. 72% odd comes from Welsh Government. So, and then that'll give you a number of increases. You could go to an increase of, dare I say, a council tax increase of 15% would bring into Conway £9.35 million. Table 8 then at the bottom of that page just shows you where we are as Conway in, if you like, the Football League table of 22 teams. Conway is the 9th lowest in that table. I don't know whether it's to the right of me or to the left of me. Our neighbours, for example, in Gwynedd, I've worked out on a typical Band D property. I think in Gwynedd it's about £88, 84p more than what Conway is. Now, if you do the maths around about the amount of house, and it's not a perfect sum, but if you calculated that by the amount of houses in Conway over 55,000, taking away, you know, those on council tax relief, etc., and single tax, just times that by roughly about 24,000. You can imagine the amount of additional money that would have brought in. And our neighbours, if you like, to the right, Denbighshire, are £41 a year higher than what we are in Conway. So, as I say, if you equated that to the number of households, it would be quite a substantial income for Conway if we were at those levels. If we just go over the page to page 107, yeah, here we go. So on table 9, this is going to basically shows us. We all know our resource shortfall is 21,528,000. So you can see at the top of that table, that goes across the table. Now we need to close that gap. So how do we close that gap? Well, we can close it by reducing and cutting and being more efficient. And we've identified just over £11.5 million. We are going to look at revenue business cases. We're looking at business cases, so we may be able to shave some off there, but we don't know yet because we haven't got there. So if we increase council tax by 10%, we would bring in revenue of 6.224 million. And then if you look at the bottom of that table, increasing council tax by 10% still leaves us over 3.7 million short. So we've still got a massive amount of work to do and 4 weeks to go. So and you know, again, the teams are working incredibly hard. Again, if we looked at 12.5% increase in council tax, that would bring in 7.78 million, and it reduce our shortfall to just over 2 million. And then in the worst case scenario, 15% increase in council tax would, along with all the cuts that we're doing to services, would give us a shortfall still of over £600,000. Let's have a look at what does that mean to the Conway resident. So the next table down there, and I'm nearly through the tables, table 10 shows us that if we increase council tax by 10%, what does that mean to me? I'm a Band D. I'm a resident of Conway. Basically, what it means to me is I'm going to have an increase in my council tax of £2.27 per week. My father lives on his own. he gets the single person discount. Basically, he'll be looking at a weekly rise of £2.07 in his council tax. What does that mean annually? Well, annually for me in my band D, I'm looking at an increase over the year of £143.82, and my father will be looking at round about, I hope he doesn't mind, he won't be watching. My father will be having an increase of £107.86. And then if you start going down the lines, then that's on a 10% increase. And we know, don't we, what 10% headline in the newspaper is shocking, but behind that, and I still get it's an increase, but 10% is £2.77 a week. At this point, I would like to say that there are a number of people, and I would like to see if we can do some sort of press release regarding council tax. I pay personally, I pay over 12 months. I could have the opportunity to pay over 12 months. So there's a lot of people out there. What I'm saying is, if they are finding it tough and are finding it difficult during the cost of living, one, have a look at seeing whether you can stretch your payments over 12 months. You'll be paying less than you are this year if you do that. The other thing is get in touch with, you could get in touch with our revenues, benefits or citizen advice, because you may fall into entitlement regarding council tax reduction. Myself, I'm probably looking at spreading the cost over 12 months, and that's an option there. But as soon as council tax is agreed in March, we have to get the bills out, and once we push the button, it's going to make it a little bit more difficult to then put people from 10 payments to 12. So if any people, and I ask councillors, if anybody comes to say and they're on 10-month payment, just offer the option if they can go over 12. That's something that may help. So that's just giving you the cash terms. So we now know roughly what cash sums are looking like to the residents of Conway. On page 108, I just want to jump forward a little bit, and that tells us, we've had a massive, it's been the most difficult year for me as a councillor, and I joined in 2004 with Chris Cater, and for me financially this has been the most difficult year I've ever encountered. But again, we have got an amazing team that's helping us along the way. So jumping forward to the year 24-25, I won't go through the figures, but for me, you look at the bottom of that, you will see that there is a resource shortfall. Once we close this gap, we've got the mammoth task of looking to find a resource shortfall of over £18 million. Of course, and I said yesterday in finance, as soon as this budget, as soon as we set out 23-24's budget, we will be getting straight on to work, looking at closing that gap and setting up again the budget working group along with all the other parties that we work with. So that's on page 11. So I just want to come back now on page 109-12. So it's bringing us back. What you see in that table is it will identify some risks and mitigation to those risks. I won't go through them, Leader. If we go to page 111, it talks about what are our next steps. Well, our next steps, I said earlier that we have a further 2 meetings prior to cabinet, and then on to full council for looking to set the budget. My call to councillors is that if you've any ideas, even I know it's fairly late in the day, if you have any ideas on efficiency savings or any other areas that you feel that we haven't looked at that could bring in some savings or cuts or whatever, you know, come forward. You know, you can email Amanda's team, myself. So if anybody's got any other ideas where perhaps we haven't looked, I'm really open to looking at that. But coming to me in council on the 2nd of March saying I can't support this because what we need to, it's going to be too late. So I know we've only got 4 or 5 weeks, but that's my plea. So as I said, this report, I'm coming to the conclusion, Leader, I do apologise, but this report is supported by a number of attachments. They're included for clarity of information. I think scrutiny yesterday was really good, and I said earlier that the report stood up to, I believe the report stood up to scrutiny. There's some information there regarding the details on the budget cuts and the impacts on some schools. We've had some statements from some schools. What I would like to point out, I did read in one of the statements, is that the school said, on top of my pay rise for teachers, on top of increase in energy, 5% cut is going to be too much for us. But I want to reiterate to schools and to council, we are paying the teachers' pay rise, we're paying the energy. So, you know, that needs to come out. We are paying that. I'm going to take a drink of water, I think, but the recommendations are on page 92, paras 21, 22, 23. And can I be reminded of Frosks, please? There were some recommendations, which if I could, from Frosk yesterday, that if I could just briefly talk through, if you could just read them out to me, and I'll just make a comment on them, please.
Will do.
Thank you,
So
Leader.
recommendation from scrutiny was that the overall shortfall of 21.528 million be noted, and that it be acknowledged that only essential and unavoidable business cases will be submitted.
Absolutely more than happy with that.
That council tax increase be kept as low as possible.
Absolutely happy with that.
Good man. That further information be provided on how schools will meet the proposed budget reductions and the implications of the reductions.
Struggling with that. So is it 55? 55. We've got it. I mean, we can get it, but whether we can get it in time is 55. We've got to go to 55 schools and say, you know, what's the impact? So,
Mike, can I come in on that?
yeah, of course.
So
Thank you.
that's why we have the school budget forum. And I was going to come in and say that yesterday, but I knew we'd be discussing it today, is that at the school budget forum, it's chaired by one of our secondary school head teachers. You have representatives from large primaries, small primaries, rural Welsh schools, secondary, large secondary, small secondary. I mean, it literally is covered by representatives for every type of school. And then they feed back. You have the cluster model, you have governors there, you have members of this council, you have myself, you have officers. So I struggle to see a better opportunity for schools to raise those concerns. That's fed back then into education scrutiny. And as Mike said, there was feedback within this report as well that went to Frosk yesterday, highlighting some of the impacts around schools. So I just feel it's asking for more information when schools are working hard currently, and they have the opportunity, and the school budget forum is meeting next week. So I think if there's anything specific they want to raise, they will raise that, and that will be fed into this process. So I think it's duplication, I believe.
Okay. Right.
Okay. So I don't know where that will go with the recommendations.
I'll bring Paul in a second. There was one more, that
Yeah,
line
sure.
5 and 6
Okay.
of the risk table, table 12 within appendix 1 of the report to be amended to include risks to schools, which is okay. Was it?
Yeah. Happy with that.
We're going to bring Councillor Paul in, please.
Really good job, Mike, and that is in no way said in a patronising way. I think you've done a sterling job there. Just on that proposal from scrutiny, and I wasn't planning to speak today, and I know, Charlie, we've had disagreements about this, but in terms of consultation and having information in the public domain, I think in the budget setting process, it is vital that happens. And I think actually it's quite a modest request. I'm at a governor's meeting after this meeting, and I'm sure my head teacher of that school would have no worries about putting a few sentences together in relation to this request. So I don't think it's problematic. I was meeting with a head teacher of Emrys ap Iwan yesterday afternoon, and I'm sure she wouldn't find that, she's a foundation school, I'm sure she wouldn't find that too problematic either. So I do hope Cabinet will further reconsider that. Just one other question, Mike. You are going to increase my Chip Gym Fit membership, I hope, as part of this process, because I think we didn't discuss it yesterday, but that's an area of extra income we do need to pursue. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Paul. Noted.
Amanda, do you want to comment?
Yeah, just in terms of the request by scrutiny about schools. I mean, obviously happy to do with whatever cabinet's recommendation is, but just from a practical point of view, I think the reality of us getting information from 55 schools by the end of this week, effectively, it would be incredibly difficult, and therefore I would suggest, if cabinet were in support of it, that we request it for the following report that will be coming to you on the 20th, because that's more realistic in terms of gathering it. I also just want to flag up as well that some schools will anyway, irregardless of the 5% cuts, be having a reduction in their budget because their pupil numbers will be changing. And I guess just a caveat, a word of warning, that their ability to separate out what might have to cut because of the change of pupil numbers might be a little bit difficult to separate from what they might cut as a result of a 5% cut in their budget. So just to say, I don't think it's quite as clean and clear cut as it would suggest, but just from an absolute practical point of view, we're not going to get it by the end of this week, and therefore I would request, if cabinet want it and support it, that we do it by the 20th. Thank you.
Mike?
Yeah, I think if we could get the time, and as Paul says, it's not going to be war and peace. Whether it's, I think it was asked maybe a couple of sentences or just a short statement. We don't want to be here with hundreds of pages. So yeah, if I hear what you're saying, and if that's what's required and is doable, as long as we got the time, yeah, I'll take that on board.
Just got a question for Councillor Cheryl.
Thanks very much, Councillor Charlie. It was two observations yesterday from chairing the Frost committee, which went into great depth in all the finances, and to thank again Amanda and the team for the work they put into this. Reiterating what Mike said, the committee took great exception to the fire authority's increase. They really did. And things were highlighted there, i.e. the fire authority suddenly setting up their own large finance department when previously they'd used Conway's excellent services for presumably far cheaper. That kind of thing really stuck in the craw of members. And going to your second point, Mike, you said don't come to me on the 2nd of March saying you don't agree with the budget. You will know that during all the budget working groups that lots of us attended, lots of backbenchers, there were some really, really good proposals put forward, and some very, very hard takes on the budget. There were things suggested that members did say were unpalatable, but we have to remember, we have to provide safe statutory services for our residents. We have to keep our vulnerable safe, our looked after children. And when we come to the council tax rise, our people out there are really, really hurting post-pandemic. They really can't afford any rises, and we have to make these cuts now. We have to take things down now before we get to the point, where it's going to have impact on huge amounts of people. So there are hard choices to be made, and you took notes, didn't you, of all the things we discussed. So thanks very much for that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Cheryl. And yeah, basically my ask was, you know, if there are any ideas come now, yeah, I'm sure Aaron will certainly take on board fit membership, Paul. What I was trying to say is that we will be presenting a balanced budget on the 2nd of May. If there are any ideas, perhaps where more savings or cuts could come, because I think, you know, I took on board what Councillor Ann said, where she said, you know, we need to keep council tax down, you know, as low as we can. I've just gone through the table of what would a 10% increase mean to us, and what would the deficit still be between us having a balanced budget and not. And I've gone through a couple 12.5% and what have you. Yes, we're working tirelessly. I think it's fair to say that Amanda and the team working with ERF will be looking at the energy, which I think we put £7 million in for energy increases, and that includes schools. There may be some cap on that, which we will look, and we may be able to identify a saving there that would then reduce that deficit. But at this moment, we are identifying money that's going to eat at the shortfall. Obviously, if we then get in a position that we get in a position then that we can start eating into council tax, absolutely, we will take that on board. But I do thank you, Cheryl, and I thought yesterday's meeting again was excellent. I'm like your cheerleader. As I said, there basically I take on board Frossa. I think I'm happy to accept them, given the fact that we can have a little bit of time to get that information from schools, and I don't know whether we could do that via governing bodies or whatever. And as I say, the recommendations for this report are on page 92.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Thanks for taking us through that so thoroughly. Councillor Chris.
Yeah, I think on balance, Councillor Mike, you're quite right about the requests from the schools about more information, because 5% cuts are going to be painful, and we want to know where they're going to fall, if it's going to be staffing or the budget for building improvements or maintenance or whatever. So I think it would be really useful to have an idea where that money's going to be saved. So I would support that. I know it makes more work for the schools, but you know, these are challenging times. So yeah, let's have the information. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Gromway.
Thank you, Councillor Mike. This has been extremely challenging in my long years on the council. This is probably the most difficult year we've had in balancing our budgets and whilst trying to maintain services. We've seen significant pressures from outside pressures from just not the pay, but also from our costs of energy, the costs of material. Everything has gone up tremendously. But our prime objective is to deliver excellent service for our authority. And if we are going to do that, we will have to look at how that's going to be paid for, and whether it be a council tax increase or efficiency savings. We will continue that hard work. So I'm happy to second the recommendations.
Okay, Joe Gromway. Any councillors?
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mike, for explaining it so that we all understand what you are putting forward. So thank you very much indeed for that. And thank you, Amanda, for all the work that you put in, of course, as always. I think where the schools are concerned, we've got to remind ourselves about the strikes that are coming up as well, and not put too much pressure on the schools to be delivering what we want. So I do think that the 20th is a more favourable date. And just going into my own portfolio, I'm going to be optimistic to say that without transformation of children's placements, that I'm really hoping that we can see a difference. We're not going to see it immediately, but with the new therapeutic service we're going to introduce, I know from my own professional background what a difference that makes. Being able to provide that therapy early on and not later on, because you've lost work with the families by that time. So I am optimistic that hopefully by 12 months' time, well, we'll be on the journey, and I'm hoping we will have accomplished some of that work in that time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Got Councillor Emily online.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks to Mike and Amanda and everyone that's put a lot of work into this report. Yeah, and I suppose thanks to Welsh Government, because they've passed on more than the consequentials to local government in Wales. I think from some of the budget working group suggestions, I found them really useful, and to have those really open conversations with all the councillors to try and see where they're thinking. And as Mike's been really open with, if anyone's got any ideas, please feel free and come in. I think some of the frustrations with that has been that when you can see if there are bigger savings to be made, the amount of time that like statutory consultations will take, it's not going to produce a quick saving for this year, and that's been quite a difficult one to be able to make the savings that we need for the March budget. Whilst yes, they will make a saving, it's going to take much longer for us to see that. So yeah, I'm really happy with all the recommendations. I do appreciate what Councillor Julian, Councillor is saying about schools needing time to do this, and if this is an ask, isn't it? Nothing's going to happen if they can't produce that by the end of that by that date. Maybe it's something for us to bear in mind if this is something we want to do moving forward, so that we give schools longer to be able to do that, because I am aware of the pressures that they are under as well. But yeah, thank you very much, and thanks for all the reports.
Yeah, and I thank my cabinet colleagues, for the support and work they've been doing through their portfolios in bringing us to the position we are. And I think, Emily, I'll have to say, there is some work to be done, and I know that you're doing it on, we've got out of county placements, we've got the highest proportion of children homeless in bed and breakfast, and I know there's work that you're doing lobbying Welsh Government, and if that brings in extra money, it'll all go to help. So what we need is solutions to them, because they're the biggest spends at the moment that we've got, the pressures. We need to build houses for the homeless. That'll help us with the position we're in with bed and breakfast. And as I say, if we've got out of county children, let's bring them back home, bring them back into county, and that will also relieve the pressures on the budget also, Leader.
I entirely agree. When we look at next year's budget, clearly we have to make some significant and substantial changes to how we operate, or we're staring in the abyss there. If there's no more comments, I'd just like to have my thanks to you, Mike, for all the hard work you put in. Amanda, I think you're right to identify all the heads of services in the fact that I think there's been a real recognition that this is a crisis that we all face. It can be easy sometimes to sort of want to protect your own budget line. We've seen that in Cabinet before, but again, I think everybody's realize how significant this is. We've gone a long way to closing that gap, but there's still quite a bit of work to be done. And every cut you make gets harder and gets deeper, so it gets more difficult to get that last bit of money out there. But yeah, pleased with where we're at. Clearly, no one wants to be in a position where they're looking at making cuts to social service, looking at making cuts to schools. You could really make a case for schools needing more funding after COVID and the damage it's inflicted on our young people, but the numbers don't lie. We've got a certain pot of money. We can't rely on our residents to pay any more than they can afford, which will be really difficult. So it's a difficult problem to solve, and we just have to come up with it with the best we can, best of the bad job essentially in some cases. So thanks for that. More work to be done, but we've had a proposed and seconded. Can members show they're in favour, please? Sorry, Peter.
Are you voting on the recommendations as amended by scrutiny?
Yes.
Rather than the ones in the report?
Yes, but with the proviso that the school would be the next meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that okay?
So A to E as from on our paper.
Do you want me to read them out, or do you want to read them out?
I'd love to hear you read them out.
Okay, members, so the recommendations from scrutiny to Cabinet that you're voting on is A, that the overall shortfall of 21.528 million be noted and that it be acknowledged that only essential and unavoidable business cases will be submitted. B, that the council tax increase be kept as low as possible. C, that further information be provided on how schools will meet the proposed budget reductions and the implications of the reduction, and this will be a later date for 20th of February. That D, that lines 5 to 6 of the risk table in table 12 within appendix 1 of the report be amended to include risks to schools. And E, that the assumptions relating to pay pressures as outlined in paragraphs 5.1 to 5.15 of the report, which have been adopted in preparing the indicative budget, be noted and approved.
Okay, members, that's the proposal and the second. Can show for in favour of that? Okay, the all. So we stay within the finance revenue and benefits portfolio, 8.2, which is council tax reduction scheme 23 to 24. You'll find that report on pages 126 to 143. And back over to you, Mike.
Yeah, sure. So basically, we're required to have this council tax reduction scheme in and formally adopted by council on the 31st by the 31st of January. So basically, I'll just go through it. I'm going to explain it a little bit more in council. We've adopted this probably, Helen, year on year, haven't we? You know, supported by the British Legion and our armed forces champion, Council Liz, who's behind me. So basically, I just go to the recommendations, Leader, and you could see them 2, 1, and then you've got 1, 2, and 3 there. So to apply 100% disregard of war pensions, including war widow pensions, not to increase the standard extended payment period by 4 weeks, and not to increase council tax reduction minimum back date by 3 months. If we start moving with these, it's probably a financial implication on that, and I think the whole scheme about £40,000. The discretionary parts is okay. So the discretionary, we're talking about £51,000. But if we start increasing times, it's going to have an impact on our revenue budget, which we've just spoken about.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Councillor Grumley, did you want to pop your mic on, Grumley?
Yeah, Guyan, thank you for the report, Mike. I fully agree with the recommendations, and I'm happy to second them.
Okay, so as Mike said, it's been like this for years. I think it's fair and proportionate. Liz, do you want to go in?
A little bit really, but just to say I'm very happy for Conway Council to continue supporting veterans and of the armed forces, because they are in need. It's often a hidden need, but they are in need, and so I'm just really grateful for all the support that Conway's offers, and especially to Helen, who has worked very closely with me on this over the years. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, members, so we've had a proposer and a seconder. Can we vote for in favour, please? Bring it to council. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item 9, which sits within the education portfolio. It's the local authority school admissions policy 24 to 25, pages 144 to 166, and Councillor Julie will introduce this for us.
Thank you, Leader. So this is very straightforward. An internal review is conducted each year to look at the admissions, the council's admissions policy, and this year there is a proposal of minor changes. This policy is presented to Cabinet with a view of consulting on those minor changes for the 23-24 version. You'll see in 1.3 the minor changes are changes to dates. The term looked after children has been changed to children looked after. Changes to the section on medical needs, which again is just a minor change in terms of the review of that. Clarification on where you can access the catchment maps, clarification on learners with 2 permanent exclusions, and changes to how to apply for a school place. And that's just in terms of, it did before guide you to the app, which is no longer in use. So it's just about details of how to do that. Consultation will take place from today until the 28th of February. And that's it really. Recommendations you'll find in 2.2 on page 145, that Cabinet approves the local authority school admissions policy 23-24 for consultation, and that delegated authority be given to the Head of Education Services in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Education, myself, to make any minor amendments to the policy following the consultation, and then adopt and publish the policy. And that's it, Leader. I'm proposing that we go with those recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Julie. Nice and straightforward. So some minor alterations, period of consultation, and then delegated authority to accept that. Councillor Liz, did you want to come in? Okay. No other comments. We've got a proposer and the seconder. Members, can we show for in favour? Wonderful. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item 10, exempt items, Local Government Act 1972, section 100A and schedule 12A, access to information. To consider passing a resolution under the provisions of section 100A brackets 4 of the above act to exclude the public and the press from the meeting during consideration of the following item, as it is likely, if present, there will be disclosure to them of exempt information as defined in paragraph 14 of part 4 of schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972. So can I have a proposal that we move into private session? Councillor Julie, a seconder, please. Councillor Chris, can we all show in favour, please? Okay, thank you. If you can let us know when we stop recording and whatnot.
Recording stopped.